Okay, let's just get right into it. We all think we know exactly why people pack up their lives and cross borders, right? We picture desperate folks fleeing extreme poverty, risking it all just to survive. We assume migration is this ultimate safety valve for the absolute poorest of the poor. But what if the data tells a completely different story? What if the very first people to leave a village aren't the desperate ones at all? Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to completely rethink everything you thought you knew about wealth, poverty, and the real economics of crossing a border. So, does leaving for the US actually fix poverty back home? Here is the face-slapping reality. No, it doesn't. At least, not at first. In fact, right out of the gate, it makes local poverty much, much worse. Migration doesn't fix a village. It fractures it. It's a total collision between expectation and reality. You're probably expecting a modern Robin Hood story, right? The poorest escape, send dollars home, and boom, the village is equalized. But the harsh reality is entirely backward. The absolute poorest, they're completely trapped. It is actually the middle class who leaves. They go, they send money back, they buy up more land, and suddenly, village inequality absolutely explodes. The gap between the haves and the have-nots turns into a massive, yawning chasm. And look, we aren't talking about some small, isolated thing here. Over 15% of Mexico's entire working-age population are immigrants. Let that sink in. 85% stay, 15% go. When you shift 15% of an entire country's workforce across a border, the economic shockwaves back home are literally monumental. This isn't just a trickle of people, it is a structural earthquake. So let's walk through this logical roller coaster step by step. Number 1, borders are fiercely expensive to cross. You need cold hard cash for transport, guides, and just pure survival. Because of that massive upfront cost, number 2 happens. The poorest are completely trapped. They don't have savings, they have zero collateral. So step 3, the middle class takes the leap. They borrow against their land, they cash in on foreign wages, and as a result, step 4, village inequality skyrockets. The initial wave of migration isn't a desperate escape. It's an exclusive privilege. Now, don't let the dense economic theory here intimidate you. The underlying truth is incredibly simple. Think of that high initial cost as an invisible, insurmountable wall. If you're at the absolute bottom of the wealth ladder, your migration rate is 0. You simply can't scale the wall. Only the folks right in the middle, the ones who actually have the cash to climb over the wall and the financial incentive to go, can make the trip. But wait, here is the brilliant plot twist. It's all about migration networks. And I want you to forget the idea of just having a friend in Texas or California you can call up. In economic terms, a network is a powerful, cost-lowering cheat code. Past migrants share the safest established routes. They connect new migrants with trusted smugglers. They float interest-free loans to their cousins. They offer a couch to sleep on and a guaranteed job waiting in a local restaurant. They are systematically dismantling that massive financial barrier to entry. Networks turn an elite privilege into an accessible exit. This is huge. Once a village's hidden network matures, the price to cross the border absolutely plummets. Suddenly, those poorest families, the ones who are completely trapped at the beginning, can finally afford the trip. And when they start leaving and they start sending money back home to the bottom of the economic ladder, village inequality is driven completely back down. But hold on a second. We have to be deeply skeptical here. How do we know the data isn't just lying to us? How do we know we aren't just looking at some random coincidence? Like maybe towns that are naturally getting more equal just happen to have more migrants. We need bulletproof proof. So we're going to strip away all the dense academic jargon and look at exactly how researchers proved this chain of events is an absolute, undeniable fact. To get that proof, we are using history as a literal time machine. Let's go back to the 1920s. The U.S. built railroads extending deep into west-central Mexico, and they recruited workers from the very first towns those tracks hit. Fast forward to 1955, the Bracero program legally recruits millions from those exact same railroad-connected states. By 1997, those specific towns had incredibly deep 70-year-old networks. Researchers use these historic 1920s train tracks as undeniable proof. Historically lucky networks, not random chance, are secretly dictating today's poverty levels. Let's look at how 2 massive datasets lock this theory right into place. First, the MMP looked at 57 towns with large, mature networks, and they found that inequality consistently drops. Then, the ENAD dataset looked at 214 wildly diverse towns and proved that initial spike and eventual drop perfectly. But to be completely impartial here, we have to call out a major flaw in the research itself. Both of these datasets completely miss permanent, whole family movers. Obviously, if an entire family moves, there's literally no one left to survey. But even being slightly blind to those most successful migrants, the remaining numbers still provide undeniable proof of the trend. And you can see it beautifully illustrated in the actual data curves. As a community's migration network grows larger and gets older, the peak of migration physically shifts toward the lower wealth end of the spectrum. Less wealth is needed to migrate. You are looking at the exact, data-driven moment the poorest families finally get their ticket out. So this brings us to the ultimate hard-hitting takeaway of this entire explainer. Rising inequality is a temporary trap. It is not a permanent curse. That initial, painful spike in a village's inequality, it's just a temporary, necessary phase. The middle class literally has to leave first to build the network that eventually lowers the cost enough to save the absolute poorest. Which leaves us with one final, totally script-flipping question. If mature migration networks eventually equalize wealth and lift up the absolute poorest, are closed borders actually trapping the most vulnerable people in the world in permanent poverty? It's a wildly provocative thought that completely shatters how we traditionally view the economics of immigration. Definitely something to chew on the next time you hear a debate about border walls and economic relief. Thank you so much for joining me on this